Hello and welcome to How to Win the Lottery Season 7 graphic content, Asterios Polyp by David Mazzucchelli. I'm Joey Lewandowski.
It is your boy Shreds.
Hey Shreds, how are you?
I'm okay.
This is a good book. Another on this season of things we call life.
Yeah, I was thinking about how the this module being defined by medium as opposed to content has made for a string of like vastly different books. Not only what's in the books, but aesthetically, because if you look at the last three that we've done, Bitterroot, this one Summer, and this, not only is the content wildly different, but the the art is wildly different, and the art informs the story in such a specific way, whether it be the sort of bright colored violence of Bitterroot or the black and white sort of slice of life nature of the beach town and this one Summer, or this, which is much stranger geometrically defined, right?
Sure.
Like there's a lot of like very clean line drawings, and the form isn't like, there's a lot of blank space on every page, and the colors are it's not black and white. Like, I guess black and white you would say is like binary as far as color is concerned, but it's like using colors in a unique way in that there's rarely more than two colors on each page, and those colors like sort of dictate mood and also form, because like the present day has the yellows, and then the past has the blues, and it's there's something very, very interesting about this, and like something that interests me is that I guess the art, it's all one guy, right?
I think the only name in here is David Mazzucchelli.
Yeah, so it's like you can see that it's like this is not a collaborative book.
No,
you can like he is like the art is married to the content directly, like from a single brain, which is we'll come across that a couple times this year. I mean, Junji Ito is like that as well, right? And I think
Prison Pit
will be like that for sure. So it's like there's such a distinct difference between the collaborative nature of things like Seeds, Bitterroot, Kingdom Come, and stuff like Asterios Polyp.
We record these in order, so we haven't gotten here yet, but the next two are also, I think, wildly different in both exactly what you're talking about, like the sort of structure and the style and the color and the tone. But we have Kingdom Come and then Prison Pit. And then I don't know what Ragnarok looks like or feels like. I feel like that might be similar to some stuff, but like...
Yeah.
But it feels like Kingdom Come is like going to be different, and then Prison Pit is definitely going to be different.
Kingdom Come and Prison Pit are like the difference in art between these like sort of fine art oil paintings versus Johnny Ryan's like violent cartoonism is like such a stark contrast.
So I looked up a little bit about the publication for this because I didn't know anything about it. So David Mazzucchelli, his wife, Richmond Lewis, they put together this thing called Rubber Blanket, which is a comics anthology magazine. And so I guess while they were making that, he had this idea, and it would have been like an entire season of that. So they just did this as a separate thing. Yeah. But there's a funny thing. There's a quote he has, because if you look, so it's all about architecture. And I want to get back to what you're talking about in terms of like the aesthetics thing. There's a lot here, but I was wondering, because I got this from the library, and there's like the book, right? And then the dust jacket is like shorter than the book, and like it's kind of weird and like looks like it's wrong, right? Yeah. But he said Wiki calls it an architectonic design that alludes to themes of form and function, blah, blah, blah. And then they asked about like, why did you do this? And he said, quote, "It's the most frustrating package I could come up with." So he's just like, I'm going to make something annoying and difficult because that's what I want to do.
You know, like let's give some insight into our lives outside of this podcast, which is that we do this insane bracket thing.
I thought you were okay. There's another thing about this podcast that I thought you were going to refer to as well. Yes, but please go.
We do this insane bracket thing where we have, in like our very, very small group of friends among a larger group of friends, we have done a 64 band bracket where we create
68 band, even
68 band bracket where we each like craft playlists for the bands that we've drafted, and then those playlists go up against one another, and then we all vote, and then they move on to like, you know how March Madness brackets work.
Or maybe you don't, because sports guys don't really cross over with other stuff. But yes, keep going.
And then our dear friend, like, sort of nailed me down with this when the Harry Nilsson bracket came out, which is he says, like, it's something that's good, but then also intentionally annoying. And it like felt like someone was putting a sword directly through my heart. He so like nailed such a specific kind of art that I like, where it's like, oh, like, this is really good, but like, is it too good? Should we do something to make it more difficult for the people who are consuming this art? And the answer is yes. I mean, that's the shit that I like.
Well, what I thought you were going to say about this podcast was, you know, we're reading, like, we're ahead now, but typically we will map out a module so that, like, it's an average of like 30 or 40 pages a day across the 10 books, right?
Yeah.
And in there is usually 1 or 2 difficult books that we like take like a couple weeks, more than there's the 2 weeks to read or whatever. This, because graphic novels read more quickly, we're ahead of the game. And I'm like, oh, we can take a couple months off. And you're like, what if? What if instead we just do a really difficult module? And I'm like, what if we don't do that?
Yeah, what if instead of taking 3 months off to relax and not like and read for fun a little bit, but maybe like I can catch up on schoolwork, you can catch up on
other stuff,
whatever you want to do. What if instead of that we did a 10 book module
of the 10 most difficult
books that are like between 800 and 1200 pages long that you really need to give about a month each, and then eventually by the time we get to the end of that module, we'll actually be behind on things.
And then I was like, no.
This idea has been rejected.
Also, I love the idea, but also it's not fair to you, the listener, who like suddenly is just like, oh, so I have 2 weeks to read whatever, right? Like,
yeah, Gravity's Rainbow or something.
Boy. But yeah, I mean, but that is you defined to a T.
Yeah. This
just very funny.
He as much as I loved this book, I love it more now that I know that he's making it more difficult on
just
purpose.
Like a curmudgeon kind of, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
In terms of the design, and it's radically, like, I was sort of a little surprised. Do you know when this was published?
2001, 2002?
2009.
Oh, okay.
But reading this, I would have guessed for any, I don't know, like 80s or 90s. Mm-hmm. Reading this felt very much like understanding comics. Yeah,
I think there's there's definitely like a DNA shared between them.
And I think there's a lot of different things, and I don't know if I have the vocabulary to articulate why, but I think the space and the empty space and the different, like, the actual like lettering, and I think the different styles, and like actively trying to be different from chapter to chapter, page to page, whatever, felt so very Scott McCloud to me. And I'm like, this is like, I don't think what did kind of throw me is that, you know, understanding comics, like we talked about in the intro episode, teaches you how to read books and like how to appreciate them, like, you know, left to right and whatever. Here, what was really throwing me every single time, I never even caught on to it by the end, like I never figured it out, but like he would have like big text next to little text. Mm-hmm. And my brain would read, and it's like, no, you're supposed to read all the big text first and then little text. Yeah. But like, it looks like if you're reading, it should go like big word into little words into more big words. And she's like, no, you got to read down.
So you were like, what is going on here? What is he saying?
Because I was like, my brain is just like, keep read left to right. And it's like, no, you got to read top to bottom and then left to right. And it's just like, whoa, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
It was cool, but it's also like, are you just fucking with us?
Yeah.
And maybe.
No, I think, I mean, that seems like an intentionally difficult way to present text on a page. There's some other stuff that's weird here about the art. I mean, okay, so with the Scott McCloud stuff, it's like, it is also like a single person narrating directly to you almost.
Yep.
And there's formal inventions, like the twin is following him, and the twin is like, and you see the outline of the twin, which is actually identical to the drawing of the It Follows design for a t-shirt that I sent you.
So another behind, you're getting so many peeks behind the curtain in this episode, but I buy too many t-shirts from like all these different horror sites, and a movie that I love that all these sites also love is It Follows. And in spite of the fact that everyone loves this movie that has like pretty clearly defined like themes and stuff, all the art is trash.
Yeah.
It's bad. Mm-hmm. And so Shreds over here doodled a mock-up in like 30 seconds, and it basically is a Asterios and Ignacio Polyp.
It was a drawing of Micah Monroe running, like with like fear on her face, and then in the background, instead of seeing the monster following her, you would see like an outline like a dotted outline to indicate that there was an invisible thing like chasing after her.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good design, and I feel it justified now that he's
absolutely. So this book is all about Asterios Polyp is an architect who seems beloved, but also
a paper architect is important
because he's never had a building made.
So he's essentially a conceptual artist whose art has never entered into any kind of public consciousness. He's recognized academically, and is a very popular and successful artist academically, and probably is paid for those designs, but his designs never have been seen by the public or constructed in any real way. Sort of the same way that there are beloved screenwriters who make entire livings and they've never had a film or television program made, but they still make a good living as a screenwriter in Hollywood, which feels insane to me.
Right. But he's also a professor, and he also is like this kind of womanizer and seems successful in most things, although also at the same time unsuccessful, unfulfilled, failing in many ways.
Yeah, it seems it's very similar to a Philip Roth constructed narrative in that you have this academic who lives an intellectual life, and that intellectual life is sort of placed next to a more like carnal base life that he can't really access or can't understand and can't like anticipate or consider other people's needs because he's like sort of coldly intellectual, and everything is about like dissection and turning words around in phrases and having something smart to say and come back, that he doesn't realize that like what's needed in certain circumstances is warmth or
empathy,
love
or silence.
Yeah. Or like, he doesn't need to continually show how clever he is in all circumstances.
This actually, I was trying to figure out which book we covered this module that reminded, like the protagonist is very similar, I think, to the Junji Ito, to the No Longer Human, because it's like this guy beds all these beautiful women, and he's so talented. And look at it, he's an architect. Isn't that a cool job? And like at the end of the day, like he's alone. He winds up alone, although doesn't really wind up alone. But like
when we talk about him as a womanizer, it's only just the one. He only has his wife.
No, but there are like little montages or whatever. But like it's also like every 3 years he's a different woman. Like they all like. He's in bed with them, but like he also like puts his foot in his mouth or whatever. So like it's not like it's not like No Longer Human, where it's seemingly like 3 or 4 different women in the the course of like a summer or whatever. Oh, so the other thing in terms of the narrative is that it is somewhat, largely, partially unclear to the extent narrated by Ignacio Polyp, his identical twin brother who died in the womb,
which is a like fairly old trope, right? This idea of the dead twin that is haunting the living sibling.
Do you know that Elvis Presley?
Yes, I do. Do you know there's a book about that? A novel about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also like a September 11th novel, I think, somehow.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I told you the key. I was going to say, like, could we do a module? I don't want to do this, of books about actors and stuff that we've covered at other shows on the network. And then you mentioned 9/11. I will remind you once again, because I will bring it up every single time, the Keanu Reeves documentary I watched where they blamed 9/11 on Keanu.
Wait, what? They blamed 9/11 on Keanu?
Oh, you don't remember this? I told you on this.
They blamed something sad about Keanu on 9/11.
No, they're like, he went through an unspeakable number of tragedies. Like his sister got sick, his wife died, or whatever, whatever, and then 9/11.
Yeah, but that's not blaming it on him. That's saying that it's another tragedy that happened within his life.
But it happened to him, basically. Yeah.
Okay. The only person we can really blame for 9/11 is Mark Wahlberg.
He should have been on that plane.
Yeah.
I love this book.
I do too.
This might be my favorite one we've read this season.
Oh, I love it. I love that that's true for you, because it feels like, because This One Summer is my favorite book, and that feels like a reversey. Right? Doesn't it feel like this would be my favorite book and that would be your favorite book?
But we both love both of them.
Yeah. But it's like this slice of life, innocent book about childhood during one summer, and like it's a coming of age story, and it's all about like human warmth.
And this is about difficult men being difficult.
Yeah, and this is about like cold intellectualism, the idea of creating this world of binaries. Although I'll say this, there is a moment in this book that is so sweet and touching that like I don't know. It's as sweet as anything.
Which one?
It's when he builds the treehouse.
Oh,
because it's
he finally
like,
builds a building
because he's never built anything.
Yeah.
And then when he does build something, it's so meaningful because he's doing it for this kid too. And it's just like, and he creates it, and it's like, you know, these people don't know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
He's just like a guy at their house.
But they can tell he's a good guy. Like there's a lot of
he's working as a mechanic. Mm-hmm. He like has these like fairly intellectual conversations about things like Marxism and other stuff with both the
mechanic and his astrologer wife.
Yeah, and then this kid who's in a punk band. Like he builds a treehouse for the kid, and it's the first time that anything that he's ever like conceived, and he doesn't even conceive it. He doesn't like design it or anything. He looks at the design, and
it kind of sucks, right?
But what's important about this is that we see in his personal relationship that he is always taking over, especially in like intellectual things. He's taking over conversations, and he like has to impose his aesthetics on his relationship, on like all the people around him. He's a dominant academic force. His wife is like, you know, rightfully nails him for being narcissistic.
Yep.
And he looks at this guy's design, and this is entirely his wheelhouse. And he could.
And this guy has no idea.
He could take it over and be like, look, we're going to do this. Like, and he doesn't. He just builds the design as the guy wants.
The guy hands him a piece of paper and just like, I'm going to put some windows there. And he just goes, looks good.
Yeah. And there's something so great because it's like, it shows character growth in a really beautiful way. But it also shows him like moving outside of the intellectual world into the physical world, where he actually gets to create something with his hands rather than he becomes not just a paper architect, but someone who actually builds something.
Yeah.
And there's something really touching about that to me.
There's also a very nice moment at the end. So the story tells, you know, we get a lot of his marriage to this woman, Hannah. And then it's also in modern day as he's, you know, his apartment burns down, right? And
he's struck by lightning. He
just leaves. He's just like, where can I get for this amount of money? And he winds up in the middle of nowhere and becomes a mechanic and moves in with his family and like grows as a person, whatever. But at the very, very end, you know, and he also gets divorced. Like you see like the rise and fall, like the meeting and the marriage and the divorce of him and Hannah. And at the end, he like goes back to her place. Like it ends here. I was like, I really like this book, but I hope it like ends in a way that like nails it. And he gets to their house, and I just love the way the text bubbles, which I have more to talk about the text bubbles, like they're like interweaving with one another. Like they're just like so excited. Like they picked up like where they left off or whatever. And she's still alone because she never met anybody like him, and he's still alone and whatever. And then again, character growth. She's just like, let's just sit here quietly for a while. I was like, okay. And I'm like, this is so nice. And then you turn the page and there's a fucking asteroid. And I'm like, yes. And then there's like a 2-page little coda where we go to the treehouse.
Yeah.
And we see the parents and the little kid, and they see a shooting star, which they don't know, I guess, like that asteroid seems big enough that's going to like
destroy the earth. Yeah.
End all life.
Yeah.
And like, ooh, shooting star. And that's sweet too. But I loved just like I think it stuck the landing and nailed the landing.
Well, it's indicative of like, you know, he may have changed, but it's like, it's still a disaster. Like if they get back together, it's like they have this sweet moment, but if it continues, it might be a disaster.
Or like he finally changed, but for what? Because they're all going to die anyway.
Yeah, right. That's yeah.
But one other thing, so in terms of the text bubble, I really liked, and I can't imagine how difficult it is, that every single character has a different text bubble shape and font and style. And I'm like, this seems, again, so needlessly difficult, but very cool.
And it matches, like, you really get a sense of the way those characters speak based on them.
You know, like Asterios is like kind of basic, and then you realize, like, compared to everybody else, like, oh no, you're kind of like blocky and annoying.
Yeah. There's also something
and
about
rigid
him, that it like his drawing, the drawing of him reminds me of like classic New Yorker art. And you see him, I think, exclusively in profile.
I think so.
So like that's weird too. And then sometimes it moves you away from the typical line drawing of him to show you like the geometric pre like art like that's sketched out to create this person.
As he's sort of like as he and Hannah are fighting, like that happens, right?
Yeah.
I also like, you know, in terms of the profile thing, toward the end when he's at the kids' punk show and it's just a guy like saying like the slur F word at him, and then he bashes a bottle over his head, and Asterios loses an eye. And I'm like, are we never going to see it? They're like, you see I'm like, because the next like 10 panels are him with his good eye.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like, his head flips. I was just like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wild though. Well, yeah, here, like him and like them fighting, and like she kind of becomes differently drawn as well.
She's animated as red in that, in like his blue world. Like the blue gives you like a cold tone to everything.
But they're alike, right? And then when she finds out that there's cameras, she turns red.
Yeah.
And it's combative, and he turns into the sort of the doodly shape.
Yeah. That's pretty weird. The camera stuff is weird.
But like she explains, and then what I liked about that is when he explains to her why he's been filming his entire life because of Ignacio and whatever, she like gets it immediately, and she's like, oh, just like the emperor in China. And then that's dropped for like 150 pages. Yeah. And then finally it's explained. But I'm like, are we ever going to learn? And then of course we do. But like he comes back to it in a way that's very smart and very interesting.
Yeah. There's also if you look at the cover, there is a 3D glasses kind of vibe to a lot of it, where it like uses these overlapping colors that if you could remove one, I don't know. I don't know like what the ultimate effect is, but there's something about it that creates this. Also, it's got like a very like period piece lettering and stuff. You sort of
like 60s-ish, right?
Yeah, like you come to understand it as a kind of pop art.
Which that's why like it coming out in 2009 makes sense, but also doesn't make any sense to me, right? Because it's just like this. It feels like it's not when this should have come out, but also like this exists. Again, going back to It Follows, like that movie exists outside of time.
Yeah.
This seemingly exists outside of time. Like the only weird kind of technology is like the solar car.
Yeah, but this could be in the 40s, 50s, 60s, doesn't matter.
It's just a guy, it's like an intellectual, and then she's doing like art.
Yeah. The only thing, you know what dates it a little bit is, but even not, I mean, this could be over a 40-year period, is him expressing admiration for the design of the World Trade Center. Which is interesting. Because I guess that was it was derided, I guess? Heavily mocked. Because I guess it is incredibly simple.
But he loves that there's two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which also felt weird that it came out after 9/11. But that took place before, like that era, whatever. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you always have that sense of, it's interesting. No matter what, there is art that came out after 9/11, and even actually in retrospect, the stuff that came out before 9/11, but specifically like there is an intentionality to the inclusion of the World Trade Center in a way that oftentimes pushes back against the entire tone, aesthetic, anything of the film itself. I remember watching or any piece of art. But I said film because I'm thinking specifically of the movie The Whackness. Have you ever seen The Whackness?
No, I know about it.
Not a great movie.
Okay.
But it like kind of ends with Josh Peck sitting on a bench looking at the World Trade Center. And it's like, man, that's not what this movie is about at all. But you just made this movie about that. Like,
does that come out after 9/11?
Yeah, but it's a period piece that takes place during the 90s.
Got it.
Because it's about like 90s hip hop. And like, it's so interesting because the decision to include it is a conscious effort to invoke everything that is implied by it. But the decision to exclude it feels almost more radical, more like you can ignore this thing that happened, that as though that isn't the primary engine behind all politics and whatever since that moment. So it's very strange. You're right. It is strange. It's interesting that it gets brought up. It almost has to get brought up because it's a book about architecture in a way. But at the same time, there has to be an intentionality between bringing it up because it invokes such strong feelings. I don't know. It's weird.
I'm also wondering, like later toward the middle, back the second half of the book, there's the lesson he sits in on where the woman puts up 2 blocks side by side. And it's like, how many do you see here? And the girl, and everybody says 2, and she's like, no. And then the girl says 3. Like, I wonder if that has anything to do with like, are there actually 3 towers? Because like the space in between or not. Like they don't make that parallel, but I'm wondering.
Yeah, or the space around the Freedom Tower. No,
Yeah.
It's like, are there still, like that empty space in the skyline still sort of invokes the...
Right. I don't know.
I wonder what... Again, this could have benefited from a little bit of research from me, but like I wonder what...
Well, that's not this podcast brand.
It's not, certainly not my brand. I wonder what David Mazzucchelli's relationship with architecture is, and what like, because I am interested in architecture. I taught at a school that had a major architecture major architecture major. And it was it was by far I think the hardest major at the school.
Well, friend of the show, Desiree, is an like she went to school for architecture, decided to become a cook, and then got her certification again. But like that's something she's passionate about. And also you did for her, I don't know if she ever listened to it, but we did a From Bauhaus to Our House.
Yeah, that's right.
Bonus episode on the Patreon, which again, don't subscribe to the Patreon.
I don't know. Architecture is fascinating to me. I love it. I fucking love Los Angeles Plays Itself. The film.
One of my favorite movies is Columbus, and that's all about architecture, right? In a city where you don't think is like,
you don't think of the Columbus skyline exactly,
but apparently it's that's a thing.
Yeah, and it's especially like this idea of conceptual architecture, because it's like you need these enormous spaces to create art, and like to create them you need an immense amount of funding. It's sort of like creating a graphic novel,
sure,
at a much larger scale. But like this idea that like, or any art really, that you create with the idea that it'll reach people somehow, but like there is a outside like funding, like you're not entirely in control of your destiny, because there's this like massive system that has to support you in order for whatever you make to be seen.
Were there any chapters in particular, or because they're not really chapters, but they're kind of chapters, like they're segmented by like a sort of a negative space splash page, like a little sort of subset, almost like there's Don DeLillo covers, like it's not like, but like I think the End Zone cover that I have is like mostly white space, like a little football guy in the middle. It kind of looks like that. Are there any like sections or chapters or chains in the No Longer Human that stood out to you?
All of the like Willie Ilium stuff stood out to me a little bit, because it's like that guy is such a rotten piece of shit, and then he's being used to maybe to show us that Asterios isn't that bad, but then Asterios like sort of doubles down on being bad by literally never stepping in to, even though he hates him.
Yep.
He won't like step in to stand up for Hannah at all.
Yep.
Which like you get the sense at first that maybe Hannah doesn't want him to, because she seems to enjoy this guy and wants to spend time with him. But like he's sexually harassing her, and Asterios is like just lets that stuff go. He's got so it's like because
he's kind of like, you picked him over me.
Yeah, it's a disappointing moment for that character. Like no, right, she picked him over Asterios, but it's like because that's a career opportunity for her and something that she needs to like grow and become like a human being outside of Asterios. And so like, but Asterios views it as a slight because he's essentially a jealous man. Yeah.
There were two that I liked that felt so wildly different, but now thinking about it now kind of makes sense. There's the one, I think it's a shorter one maybe, where it's just Hannah being gross in ways that like every human being is gross. It's her clipping her nails and farting.
Very like
and,
rapid fire. Yeah. Like just a series of
like
individual
one frame.
panels. Yeah.
And that was like, oh, like this is disgusting, but also like totally normal. And then the next one is like him not like fighting through hell, but like kind of fighting through hell. And I wonder if there was some kind of like, this is like, you know, because that's also as the relationship is maybe falling apart a little bit, like living with this person is kind of like hell. And then he like goes underground. Like there's like demons and stuff he has to escape from.
Yeah. And also that's a reflection of the play that she's working on with which is the Orpheus stuff. Right. So yeah, it's good. It's all like thematically tied together. But yeah, I also really liked that rapid fire panels of her like clipping her nails and cleaning her ears. And
because I think what works really well about this book as opposed to like not knocking serialized things that we've read, because like you have to sort of adhere and subscribe to a medium or whatever, like has to be between 24 and 28 or whatever pages, whatever, you know what I mean? But like sometimes a chapter is like 6 pages, and sometimes it's like 30, and sometimes it's like 2, and like it feels right. Like it's the kind of thing that I've noticed on TV shows that like Netflix could be like whatever you want, and like most shows are still 30 or 60 minutes good for no reason. But it's like there are shows that are like, no, this needs to be like a 36-minute episode. This needs to be like a 12-minute, like whatever. Like there's different shows that like allow the medium that they are existing within.
I feel I'm of two minds about that, because I love the like sort of the artificial boundaries that like force you to create in different ways.
Yep.
And then like also I love artistic freedom.
Yes.
But like I think that there is something that we lost when we moved away from the perfectly constructed 23-minute sitcom with commercials. Which is like, if you love structure, like
a 3-act structure, whatever.
I love structure, and I love structure so much that I love the idea of doing away with structure. Like there's, you know, like, but there's something so specific about like constructing those beats in such a brilliant way, which is like, you know, there are masters of that. James Burrows is a master of that.
Who's James Burrows?
He did like Cheers. This is his show. And like, you know, any of the great like sitcom writers, like there's such like a system behind that. And I think the same is true with comic books, because it's like you have the 30-page comic that's like, you know, 20 something pages with the commercial breaks in there. And like when you get rid of that, I think it gives indulgence to like you end up with more fat.
Yeah.
And I don't think that this is a fat book. I think that I think the stuff that we've dealt with so far has been lean and given us exactly what we wanted. I mean, I'm really, really proud with all these books that we've chosen so far.
I think in terms of the like possibility of like there being fat on a thing, I think 2 things come to mind. Number one, I think we probably talked about it in an earlier episode of the show, and I don't remember when, but there was like a variety piece or something, or maybe like a Vanity Fair about like how no one wants to write NYPD Blue anymore. They all want to write like some Netflix series, right?
Yeah.
And there's like the loss of structure and whatever.
Right.
And I think going back to a conversation we had with Heather in the intro episode, and this might have been when I brought that up, but Scott McCloud is breaking form because he understands form so well. And I think someone like David Mazzucchelli, who is editing, writing, creating, editing, whatever, a magazine that like has to hit like a certain number of like pages or whatever for publication, I think only when you have done that and you're able to do that so well, like then you can sort of strain, like you can trust in that creator.
Yeah, for sure.
But if just like some first time writers can be like, I can do whatever I want. I'm gonna do a 45-page chapter, then a 6-page chapter. Just like, well, you might not, you know what I mean? But I think someone who knows not just the medium, but just how to tell a story in a certain number of pages.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like I would bet, I'd bet anything that the writers of NYPD Blue or of Law and Order are to a person incredible. Yeah. The same way that like, you know, we know this from listening to Comedy Bang Bang or whatever and seeing people be hilarious on Comedy Bang Bang, and then you watch and then they're like on SNL and you're just like, this kind of stinks.
Right.
But like,
or just in any movie too.
Yeah. And it's just like, you realize that like those people are maybe not entirely in charge of the product that comes out in spite of like their immense talent. But like NYPD Blue, I think is probably a great school for a writer to go to just be like, you got to hit all these beats. You have to learn how to create exposition that is very clean and gives all of the information that you need to without being like wildly obvious that you're doing exposition. So like you probably learn all of the real tricks that you need for any kind of storytelling. And then maybe NYPD, maybe those crime shows or whatever should be like
required.
Yeah. Like everyone should
like
go
a 100 level course.
Yeah. Everyone should go work at a crime show for 2 or 3 seasons. And then you can go out and work on your own TV show.
Like even a show that is no longer in its prime and its heyday, like The Simpsons, still has to exist on Fox from like 8 to 8:30 or whatever. Yeah. And even if that show is not like the funniest, like you're still understand or what I'm not there yet. I'm still catching up. I'm only in season 23 or whatever of 35. So maybe it's hilarious now. I don't know. Brothy's right. Brothy's great. But you still have to know how to hit the structure. And I feel like the point of the thing, like, I don't know if it's true or not, but like, there's the freedom. Like, you can write a Netflix show and like, I want to tell like a story over 10 hours. Like, yeah, but how about you tell like a 22-minute story and like see how that goes first. And I think even, self-published, like, but still episodic, like The Seeds, is still functioning very specifically within the constraints of like a book.
And that, I mean, we're talking because we're talking to Anna Sentia a little later. How much better of a writer is she because she spent so much time as an editor and editing great writers, right? So that's like, it feels obvious that, that's like exactly how that stuff happens.
Or like you think about like The Private Eye, which was released digitally, you could have like a 500-page issue and like they don't. Like they know how to tell a story because they've been working within the comics industry for forever, right? Yeah. And so I think there's also like an expectation thing. Like I think this releasing as a book as opposed to issues.
Asterios polyp we're talking
about. Right, Asterios polyp.
Yeah,
sorry, my hand is on the book, but you can't see that. Like if this was released monthly and you go and you buy Asterios polyp, and there's like a 6-page issue to be like, what the fuck? Like this isn't what I
it's also like I said, it reflects New Yorker comic styles, but it's also like on the same level as things like Drawn and Quarterly and things like that, and all like the Chris Ware stuff, which is like, that's not like, when I go to Zap Comics, shout out Zap Comics in Wayne, which was my local comic store for a long time. It's a different audience than this. This is not the type of, you don't buy this book at a comic store, really.
Right.
I don't think. You buy, Daredevil at a comic store or Green Lantern, which is fine. I mean, that's what that's for. But this is like a different crowd. Now, that's not to say that there's not any crossover between the crowds. Obviously, there are. I love both. You love both. I'm sure Heather loves both. There's like, it's like a very broad thing. But it's like, this is like a library book or a...
Well, this feels like the kind of book that like people like, I don't really read comics, but I read this.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. It gives, right. It's that thing that it's like, this is a comic for quote unquote adults. Yeah. And it gives you an excuse to indulge in a thing because it's like intellectual stuff isn't blowing up. People aren't fighting. Nobody has superpowers. But it's still using that sequential art to tell a story that ultimately is very human.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts about Asterios polyp, or should we read Egg's email?
Let's do the Egg's email.
So we have an email address, lottery@cageclub.me. If you want to email about this book, any book, you know the deal by now. Meg's reaction to Asterios polyp. I really enjoyed this novel. I like that it was an architect book, architect in quotes. I felt like Asterios' quip that, and I can't find the exact quote right now, anything not functional was decorative. Nothing about this novel felt decorative. Even the negative spaces of the novel were acknowledged by having the narrator of the novel be Asterios' dead twin. I liked that the structure of the characters' thought bubbles and physical structure paralleled what their internal personalities were. I thought it was interesting that Asterios' growth came when he pivoted from Greek mythology to Norse. Okay. In Norse mythology, Odin gouged out his own eye to gain knowledge. Asterios only gained self-awareness once losing his eye in the accident. Although we talked about earlier, like I think he definitely grows before that, like with the treehouse and stuff like that. But also, good point. All in all, Egg writes, a great novel, and I'd like to read more by Mazzucchelli. Well, you can read the magazine that he published.
So the Greek and Norse stuff sort of is over my head. I don't know. Yeah.
I know Greek stuff, but like I don't know Norse like at all. I guess Ragnarok. We'll get to Ragnarok. Like that's definitely Norse, but and I know because I feel like Greek is like the thing people learn.
I'm teaching Antigone right now and teaching the Odyssey, both to different classes. So yeah, Greek is definitely like the thing that gets taught to kids.
Like there's like video games based stuff on Greek mythology all the time. Other books adapt on Greek.
Marvel has given us Norse mythology in a big way.
With Thor, right?
If not necessarily an accurate way. Yeah, Thor, Odin, Loki.
I think it's all archetypal, right? Like it would just, you'd have to know whatever, but yes. Yeah. Do you want to talk at all about, and I can cut this out if you don't want to, so this was a book that you picked.
Yes.
And you picked because you had heard or something that it might be
like kind of Thomas Pynchon-esque.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not.
I'm not really sure what that means.
But
in this concept. Because when I think of Pynchon, I think of
difficult.
It's definitely about structures, right? Like, because he's an engineer and he's
architecture, right? Like physical structure, not literary structure, but like physical structure.
Yeah, but he's like a rocket engineer guy.
Okay,
like he was in the army to like work on rockets and things. And his stuff is about like a conspiracy of systems, right? It's about paranoia and all that stuff. And thematically, it doesn't really cross over. Like the only thing that I can think of is that someone is. So wherever I read that description, that person was reaching for a more adult audience to say this isn't really like a comic book. It has more in common with literature, which is to say it uses high art symbolism and things like that.
And people don't have superpowers.
And it's like a guy dealing with emotions through this metaphor of structures. But other than that, the connection fails me.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you weren't disappointed though.
I love this.
Were you familiar at all with other work of his, or you just seen like someone?
I just like when looking to construct this module, I looked everywhere.
Sure.
And this like came up a couple times on lists, and I was like, yeah, that sounds good. I like it. I'm into it.
Cool.
It'll be. Something that is foreign to us, and I was not disappointed with it.
Once again, success rate continues.
Yeah, we have 100% success rate this time around, right?
Insane.
Never happened before.
That we have both liked all 7 books so far.
Yeah,
that's wild.
That is wild, and
I think we're both gonna like Kingdom Come. I know.
I know
that you do. Come. You like Prison Pit. I think I'll probably like Prison Pit. I might not.
Prison Pit is the wild swing here that
could, and then I think we'll both like Ragnarok.
Yeah, but Prison Pit is the one that could derail everything.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Keep reading. Well, before I get there, could this be adapted? I mean, it could be adapted.
Yeah, sure. I would adapt it with a lot of blank spaces, and maybe even it would be animated and have it be like.
Do you have a voice or an actor in mind for Asterios?
Let's see. How old would you say Asterios is?
Well, he always kind of looks the same, right? Even as he goes back in time, he always looks the same.
Yeah.
But I guess modern, maybe he's like 60?
Maybe someone like Jeremy Irons.
Sure. That works.
Yeah.
Keep reading.
What crime?
Coloring outside the lines?
Oh, not a crime. Encouraged. One should color outside the lines. Yeah. What crime? Why not have it be? Why not just your everyday vandalism via graffiti?
Ooh, a real graffito.
Yeah.